Good morning, everyone. My name is Robin Budish. I am the Executive Director of Transit Choices. For over a decade, we have been advocating for a multimodal, equitable, safe, efficient, and reliable transit system for the Baltimore region. And each month, it is really our pleasure to bring to you these meetings, which are open to the public, where we invite leadership within the transportation arena to share updates and important information on the projects they are working on and are responsible for, and to give you the opportunity to speak with them directly. So we like to keep our meetings flowing smoothly and ending on time. With that said, I would like to introduce our first guest speaker for this morning, Shayna Rose. Shayna is with the Baltimore City Department of Transportation, and she is going to speak with us today about advancing Vision Zero in Baltimore. Shayna, would you like to begin with a brief self-introduction, please?
Happy to. Thanks so much for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Shayna. I am a planner for the Department of Transportation for Baltimore City, and I oversee the Toward Zero program, which we are hopefully soon turning into the Vision Zero program. I've been with the department for about almost 4 years now, and I've been involved with a number of initiatives, but this is kind of my main thing now. Um, can I start the presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm here today to talk about the state of traffic safety in Baltimore and what we are doing about it, including our forthcoming transition from Toward Zero to Vision Zero. All right, so just very briefly, we're going to go over the agenda. So first, I'm going to talk about the state of traffic safety in Baltimore and how we're doing as a city. Then we're going to talk about how the Toward Zero initiative, which is our current initiative, is addressing traffic safety. Then we're going to talk about how the newly established Vision Zero program will meet our challenges. And finally, there will be some time at the end for questions. Okay, let's get into it.
Excellent.
How is traffic safety in Baltimore? Well, it's not great. I will say, though, over the past 5 years, we have seen some modest declines in overall crashes, including injury crashes. 2020 was kind of an anomaly year because of pandemic travel patterns with fewer people on the roads, and so we saw fewer overall crashes compared to 2019. But we spiked up again in 2021 as people returned to in-person life and have been declining steadily ever since. Now, while overall crashes have gone down a little bit, the ones we really care about are those that result in serious injuries or fatalities. So fatalities in 2023 were the lowest they've been in 5 years, but not by much, and serious injuries are spiking. Um, our lowest serious injury and fatality year was 2018 with 39 fatal crashes, but we've hovered between 40 and 50 fatalities every year for the past 10 years. Um, in comparison, DC had 50 fatalities in 2023, so more than us, but they're a slightly bigger city. They have a bigger metro area population, and so considering all of that, their rate was actually lower than ours. Um, Also, for comparison, fatal crashes through the state have increased by about 16% since 2019, whereas we have decreased 4%. Um, but state serious injury crashes have decreased 4%, while our serious injury crashes have gone up 11%. What about pedestrians? Well, again, we've improved a little bit since 2019, but after the initial drop of 2020, we've been climbing
Good
back up
morning.
again. Hello. And actually, our pedestrian and bicycle fatalities are increasing each year. And 2023 was the first year that our total non-motorist fatalities actually exceeded motorist fatalities. When we look at where these serious incidences are occurring, patterns emerge. So this is a map of all of these serious injury and fatal crashes from 2019 to 2023. We can pretty clearly see North Ave, particularly in the area around the metro station, West North Ave. but also in the area around like Harford Road. Yeah. We also see Pennsylvania Ave, Edmondson, um, Franklin and Mulberry, Orleans, and other just east-west roads adjacent to Orleans as well. Then Bel Air and Gay Street is a big one. Reisterstown Park Heights area in general. Monroe and Fulton, Hilton Parkway and Caton Ave, and pretty much all of downtown. Now, we use this map to influence project selection for major streetscape projects at DOT, red light camera locations, and it forms the basis for all the work of the Toward Zero initiative. So I've gone over the basic idea behind Toward Zero, but what does the program actually entail? So here's just like a little timeline of what we've done, where we've been. So the Toward Zero initiative was founded in 2018 under then Mayor Pugh. Initially, it was mainly a communications campaign aimed at influencing driver behavior. But as it turns out, education is not really an effective safety strategy by itself. And so we've turned the initiative into a small infrastructure program. We strategized the locations for infrastructure using crash data, which we first did through our high injury crash report back in 2021. Where we identified top 10 lists for highest crash intersections and roadway segments. We used this report to strategize improvements at 4 locations, 2 of which have been implemented so far. In 2022, we also wrote a strategic highway safety plan, which made us eligible for significant state safety funding called the Highway Safety Improvement Plan or Program. For the past 3 years, we've gotten a bunch of funding from the HSIP to improve pedestrian crossings at high crash intersections that overlap with trails or other major pedestrian pathways. Now, you may be wondering, what is a safety treatment? What is the best thing to do to improve safety? What does our program really focus on? And, well, you guessed it, it's complete streets. This means installing infrastructure that deprioritizes throughput for personal vehicles, but instead prioritizes safety, access, and comfort for all modes of travel. For example, pretty much everywhere we've installed protected bike lanes, which is what I've represented here, we have seen some level of crash reduction ranging from minor to major. According to national studies, protected bike lanes rank as one of the best treatments you can do to a road for safety, with estimates of crash reductions by about half overall. This is because you're condensing vehicle traffic into fewer and narrower lanes, which slows down cars by physically and psychologically constraining the space for drivers to move. Safe cycling infrastructure has also shown to increase the amount of cyclists on the road, which forces drivers to be more conscientious. There was a study that came out in 2019 that looked at 13 years of data in 12 cities, but found that roadway fatalities were inversely correlated with increases in high quality bike infrastructure and the associated increases in bicycle commuters. Now, a protected bike lane is not going to be an appropriate treatment in every context, and there are lots of other complete streets interventions that have really good outcomes as well, such as road dieting through other means and expanding pedestrian infrastructure, daylighting, curb extensions, centerline hardening, chicanes, slow turning wedges, roundabouts, just a few of the important tools in the toolkit for reducing injury and fatal crashes. Now, these days in the Toward Zero program, we operate a little bit differently than what we did back in the days of the high crash injury reduction report. Our basic philosophy is that transportation is dynamic. If you're driving fast through one intersection, you're probably also driving fast through the next several. So rather than looking at intersections and roadway segments in isolation, we look at larger areas experiencing systemic traffic safety issues. The Toward Zero traffic safety improvements and the neighborhood traffic calming CIP funds are used to do interventions on major roads with supporting neighborhood traffic calming, again, creating those systemic solutions. Using crash data, we identify high injury segments on both major and minor roads, and then we look for areas that have clusters of segments, and those are the neighborhoods that we select for systemic improvements. So this year, we've identified a cluster of neighborhoods in the east and a cluster of neighborhoods in the west that seem to have pretty bad, serious injury outcomes. And those neighborhoods are Elwood Park, McElderry Park, Milton Monfort, Madison East End in the east, and then in the west, Union Square, Boyd Booth, Carrollton Ridge, and Mount Clair. So as you can see on our map, these are neighborhoods that show up pretty bright on our serious crash heat map. So the heat map, the blue shows where serious crashes have occurred, and then the red segments are where we've identified are the high crash injury segments to actually be. So we are targeting improvements on both the major, the thick high injury segments, as well as the minor neighborhood segments, and we're working with the neighborhoods to identify both locations in addition to these segments as well as solutions. At this point in our Towards Zero project lifestyle, we are meeting with the neighborhoods to go over their existing conditions and prioritize locations for improvements. Back in the fall, we did safety walks in each of the neighborhoods with community members to observe the locations that popped up in our data, but then also get a sense of other safety concerns that weren't showing up in the data. Later this year, we will go back to communities to present alternative concepts for their prioritized locations. We'll do community meetings, pop-ups, and canvassing to ensure that a wide swath of neighbors get to review the concept ideas and provide their input. And then we will finalize the concepts and create engineering drawings probably around the end of this year. And our goal will be to construct next year. So all in all, we are aiming for the Towards Zero Quick Build program to be a 2-year to construct program. So year 1 planning and then year 2 construction. Now, if 2 years sounds slow to you, it's actually not. For DOT, that's very fast. But when you're a community that is under constant threat of traffic violence, is this fast enough? So some of the challenges of the Towards Zero program are as follows, but one of the things that I didn't write on this slide is that in the Towards Zero program, we don't have a formally adopted way of getting essential safety projects in the ground as soon as we know they are needed. Despite being quick build projects, the Towards Zero projects follow the project development requirements of all other DOT projects, which can mean that they have a long timeline. That long timeline can mean that more people get injured or killed while we are in project development. There is a need for the Towards Zero projects to be nimbler, allowing for rapid implementation of the strongest safety solutions as a pilot, with the bulk of analysis and engagement afterwards rather than before, allowing for project iteration. Other challenges of our program include capacity. For such a hefty goal of eliminating traffic fatalities, we are a pretty small program with a staff of about half or 3/4 of my time and a modest budget. I definitely have my willing collaborators, but there aren't really people, even including myself, officially dedicated to this initiative within DOT or at other agencies. Our only way of determining and evaluating target locations is through crash data. Now, crash data is publicly available and it can tell us a lot, but it does have some pitfalls. It's not always accurate, and not all crashes get reported. There is growing evidence from the University of Maryland Medical System that crashes involving pedestrians, bicyclists, and scooters are underreported. And there's a study out of DC that showed crashes are particularly underreported in predominantly Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. Plus, there are locations that are relatively low crash, but the few people who do have to, cross the street to get to the bus or walk to school or ride their bikes to the grocery store are at very high risk due to the car speeds, and we don't have good ways of reflecting that. Now, crash data needs to be measured on a scale of about 3 years to really determine trends. This means that when we install infrastructure, it's hard for us to evaluate how that infrastructure is performing in real time. We would need to wait about 3 years after something is installed to determine whether we need to make modifications to improve the outcome. And finally, there is poor understanding in the public around what actually improves safety. Now, we know based on our own analysis in the city as well as national analysis that complete streets treatments work, but they are not always accepted in communities for various reasons, including aesthetic reasons and biases based on misinformation. And all of those things can make them harder to implement. And these are the constant challenges that weigh on my mind. And so when an opportunity arose to go to the drawing board and devise a plan that could accelerate our program goals, we jumped at the chance. So looking to the future, Vision Zero. In 2023, DOT won a $1 million grant from the federal government under the Safe Streets for All program to take Towards Zero to the next level and establish the Vision Zero program. And we are doing that by creating an action plan with an aggressive but realistic timeline for our goal of zero. And once we do that, we will need to get our plan and goal formally adopted by the city through either an executive order or legislation. And so thinking about the kinds of challenges that our program faces offers an opportunity to create solutions. So we are going to address our challenges through proactive policies around project selection, project development, and evaluation protocols that make use of reliable and more robust data that can be measured on a shorter timeline. We're going to establish clear roles and responsibilities of DOT staff and other city agencies in support of Vision Zero. And we're going to devise a communications campaign that isn't punitive, but spreads awareness and builds support for what is proven to work. All of that is to say that our action plan is rooted in the safe systems approach, which means that the interaction between a variety of separate components decides whether someone survives a crash. Our action plan will focus on these components that the city can influence, which to some extent is safer people, safer roads, and safer speeds. And the majority of our action plan will focus on these three components, but we'll also have a policy section that includes elements for post-crash care and safer vehicles. The first section of our plan will be about infrastructure, since this is the most important piece of the safe systems approach. In partnership with the University of Maryland and Morgan State, we are going to be identifying and officially adopting a high injury network, and we will use the HIN to prioritize DOT projects. The HIN will be based on risk modeling of multiple data sources that influence crash outcomes, and not just crash data, which we know to be incomplete. So what kind of data will we look at? Namely, the overlap of high-speed driving and vulnerable populations. We define vulnerable populations as people not in cars, but also people in cars with chronic illnesses, the especially young or old, people with other sorts of health vulnerabilities. And so we'll be looking at locations where these people are most likely to travel through in conjunction with speed data and infrastructure data. Also, we are gathering community input. You may have heard of our near miss initiative that is part of the Vision Zero action plan, and we are definitely looking for your input. So far, people have logged over 1,300 incidences of near misses, though mainly locations that are associated with higher affluence and higher engagement. So now that the weather is nicer, we are going to be doing some pop-ups throughout the city, especially targeting areas that we know to be dangerous, but we're not really hearing from people as much, such as like over here and over here and up here. But there's still a lot that can be gleaned from what we have so far. Most logs so far have involved cars to some extent, and most people have logged near misses of pedestrians with cars. The people who are logging are experiencing these near misses pretty often. A lot of the people who logged mostly walk for their transportation modes, but also drive. So walking and driving were the two highest. And really under half were frequent bikers. So we definitely know that the population that we're hearing from is not just exclusively the bike community. Now, the top three culprits of near misses were speeding or distracted driving, driver turning without looking, and driver running a red light. And interestingly, one of the questions that we ask is, does this location prevent you from using various travel modes? And we are seeing that people are hesitant to walk and bike in the locations that they are logging, which might indicate that they would otherwise do those things if it were safer. So we are going to use this data to validate our HIN and provide some clarity about what's going on, both where the near misses are occurring as well as systemically, regionally. We're also going to use it to gauge appetite for various solutions. So we definitely want lots more people to log, especially in areas that we're not hearing from, and we will keep the near miss map open at least until we publish our draft HIN, but maybe longer than that. Okay, so to get to our HIN, we're going to be doing risk modeling of our roadways. So this will entail coming up with relationships between speed, infrastructure, vulnerable populations, and serious injury outcomes. These relationships will be based on a combination of what other studies have discovered, as well as developing our own models and equations. And we'll be able to test them on roads and intersections that we know have really bad outcomes, such as West North Ave and Edmondson Ave and Bel Air Road. So ultimately, the outcome of this academic exercise, shall we say, will be a high injury network. And we will rank that high injury network in terms of likelihood of frequent severe injury outcomes, but also we're going to be doing health impact assessments of our HIN. We're doing this in partnership with Johns Hopkins to strategize which roads on our HIN have the most opportunity to improve health outcomes with complete streets interventions. This will pertain to, yes, reducing injury and death, but also reducing the environmental and societal impacts of high-speed roads on vulnerable populations. So ultimately, our goal will be to have a prioritized list of projects that we can do to prevent death and injury and improve lives. The second section of our plan will be the communication strategy. From what we understand from case studies nationally, driving behavior is influenced mostly by the characteristics of roadway infrastructure and surrounding land use. These are things that psychologically send drivers subconscious messages of how fast they're supposed to go in the context of their surroundings. So our goal is to create surroundings that send a different message. That's an infrastructure goal. The communication strategy we will take will be to foster a public that understands how changing our surroundings can improve safety and health outcomes. We are trying to better inform the public to create more support and appetite for the infrastructure that we know saves lives. Secondarily, we'll also look to share information and create programs that enable more people to walk, bike, and scoot and take transit because there is safety in numbers on our streets, and having more people try new modes of travel fosters more respect between the travel modes. Now, there are lots of people in the public who already get it, and they're clamoring for more inclusive infrastructure. This will not be our target audience for this campaign. We are looking to find people in the city who are unfamiliar with complete streets, but in general care about safety and other related things like climate change, public health, access to education, employment, and healthcare. We are going to find these people using the outcomes of the Baltimore area survey, the JHU 21st Century Cities initiative that they administer each year to neighborhoods both in the city and the county. We are going to do focus groups with our target audience and test various messaging aimed at generating understanding and support for safety improvements. In order to create this messaging, we're going to collaborate with local artists, comedians, and graphic designers in what we are calling a brain trust to develop this messaging. Everyone's going to be paid. Ultimately, we will produce a collection of content and strategies that can be used in a public campaign, including branding for the Vision Zero program. And then finally, there will be a policy section for how the program should be set up, administered, and governed. We are going to develop this section by researching what is working in other cities and then conducting interviews with staff to determine where we have opportunity to better collaborate and create standardized operating procedures that can incorporate our HIN and messaging strategies. This is also the section where we can look at additional opportunities for other agencies to contribute towards the Vision Zero goal. So for example, perhaps the health department can do stop the bleed trainings in areas on the HIN so that if people are hit, they have a better chance of survival. Perhaps there's opportunity to mitigate the serious crash risk of city employees through the purchase of different fleet vehicles or expanding multimodal options in our fleet, or even incentivizing non-automotive travel to work. So everything is going to be explored. And just here's where we are in our timeline. So we kicked off this project back in the summer, and currently we are working on the risk modeling of our HIN. We also, as you know, we launched our near miss map, and we are working on analyzing that and collecting information. We also are just about to kick off our communication strategy, which will entail recruiting for the focus group and the brain trust. Um, Ideally, our HIN will be in draft form early in the fall, and we will host numerous open house style events and pop-ups and do canvassing, as well as have a robust online presence to solicit feedback on our HIN as well as our other recommended programs and policies and strategies. Then our goal is to finalize the action plan ideally in the winter of 2026 and adopt Vision Zero as an official city goal and policy in the spring of 2026. And so that pretty much concludes how we're currently advancing Vision Zero in Baltimore. You can stay up to date with our project on our website. That's the Vision Zero Action Plan QR code and Streets of Baltimore Vision Zero link. Here's a QR code for our near miss survey, which is also on the Vision Zero Action Plan website. And then our Toward Zero Quick Build projects, we have a website for that as well. And then finally, just a little preview of what's to come after we adopt our action plan. We also won about $10 million from the same federal fund to pilot the recommendations of the Vision Zero Action Plan. Federal funding is a little bit in limbo right now, so we hope that we'll be able to do this project, but we're very excited about it. We will be implementing quick build projects on the HIN, doing a complete streets communications campaign using what we develop in the action plan, and then also launching a Ciclovia program on the Greenway network. Okay, thank you very much. And I know we don't really have that much time left, but I'm happy to take some questions if you have them.
Thanks so much, Shayna. Would we be able to go back to full screen so I may see the gallery, please?
Yes.
For those of you that would like to speak with Shayna directly, you may either put a comment or question in the chat, or you may raise your hand. I'd like to kick off the Q&A with John Lariat.
Hi, I'm sorry. I can never find the raise hand button, so I apologize. Shayna, thank you for a very good presentation. I want to ask you about one fundamental predicate, which I think there's still some ambiguity about. Well, there's some perceived ambiguity about. Can you just tell the group what is the legal impact of the Complete Streets Law? What does it mean to have a Complete Streets Law in the city? And how does it define what we can and can't do? How does DOT do its work with regard to the Complete Streets Law? And how do other city agencies do their work with regard to the Complete Streets Law?
Yeah, so for everyone's awareness, we adopted a Complete Streets Ordinance in 2018, which means that every single project that DOT does needs to adhere to Complete Streets principles, which prioritizes pedestrians at the forefront, then bicyclists and transit riders are actually even, and throughput of cars last. So all DOT projects need to be adhering to this standard. Now, of course, in practice, this is not always perfectly the case. We are still kind of transitioning our DOT to more closely adhere to this, and the Vision Zero Action Plan will help us do that by identifying and prioritizing the locations and projects that are the most important to transition to Complete Streets projects.
And what about other agencies?
I cannot speak to other agencies, but again, in the Vision Zero Action Plan, we will identify opportunities for other agencies to collaborate with us.
And then I guess my last sort of version of that question would be, other than sort of picking things that you want to affirmatively do to further the Complete Streets ordinance, what about just evaluating individual actions that are taken to make sure that they comply with the Complete Streets ordinance?
Yeah. I mean, that's all going to be part of the action plan. We're going to be evaluating, what we're doing well, where we're struggling, and where there are opportunities to better align under that goal.
Thank you, Shayna.
Anna?
Hi, yes, thank you, Shayna. I have a question about traffic enforcement. Klaus had asked this in the chat. As someone who is often a pedestrian, I witness a lot of crazy driving. And it seems like, people feel like they can do this because they know nobody's going to enforce the traffic laws. I mean, the speeding, the red light running, the stop sign running, it's really kind of out of hand. Is the police department or something like, can we do red light cameras, speed camera? I know people hate these things, but they seem to work.
Yeah,
Is that part of the plan?
they definitely work. So we are currently strategizing where red light cameras should go based on our serious injury map. And in general, there will be a section in the plan for enforcement. Of course, we need our police department to come to the table with us and be good partners in enforcing traffic laws where we know that there are really bad outcomes. And so we will do our best to work with them, but they have capacity issues too.
Okay, thank you.
Melanie? Melanie, I think you're still on mute.
Hi, I'm Melanie Shire. I'm from one of the project areas that Shayna's working in. I'm in Mount Clair. I just wanted to mention, she was talking about like the expediency of doing this work. I'm extremely excited about it. 1 year turnaround would be massive, but just in context, the areas that she's working in right now, some of them have not seen street treatments or even wrote like paint done for decades. Like, it's not just about how fast can this project move. It's about like you're going to areas that haven't had any kind of engagement from DOT in some regards for a long time, like generational. So thank you for being here and thank you for going as fast as you can. And you have most of our support.
Thank you.
Shayna, I have a question for you, a point that you brought up in your very thorough presentation, and that is the challenges that you're facing with partnerships, both with agencies, and city agencies, as well as perhaps the public. Would you be able to speak to that in a little more detail? And also, how can Transit Choices support the wonderful efforts of your program?
Yeah, thanks. So currently we just don't really have partnerships and Vision Zero is a really big goal. It needs to be an all hands on deck approach and DOT can't do it alone. So we are looking to foster partnerships with other agencies, but also with community groups to figure out how we can best come together as a coalition. I think right now, the best thing that Transit Choices can do is plug the near miss map because that's the biggest like public push we need.
Sure.
So especially in, the areas that we're not necessarily hearing from people as much like in West Baltimore and East Baltimore and Park Heights. And then, I think that's the major thing, but we'll have more things in the future.
It would be our pleasure. So I'll talk with you offline about that. Chris?
Hi, I spend a lot of time working in like Madison, Montford, McElderry, and Madison East End. One of the things that I do notice over there, you were talking about McElderry being a dangerous place, is like it would be great if MTA would be willing to do bus rapid transit lanes particularly on like Orleans and Madison Street. They are terrifying to walk along.
Yes, thank you. And I also just want to mention, I hear you there. Definitely. We are looking at all of the roads in that area. So more to come soon. But just on the partnership component, while we are going to be recording, official channels and means that we can have better partnerships in our Vision Zero action plan, we are actively working on fostering better partnerships right now with other city agencies. For instance, we are working on a more official coordination with Rec and Parks to create safer pedestrian infrastructure around park facilities, particularly ones that are being renovated or coming online newly in the near future. So that's just like one of the coordinations we are working on, and we are working on several others as well.
Shayna, we have several comments in the chat. I'm going to read a couple before we move on to our next presentation. Before I do that, I would like to invite anyone that's with us this morning, if you're joining us for the first time and you would like to receive the meeting materials, kindly put your email or contact information in the chat. So I see Delegate Edelson is now joined us. However, I'd like to take a moment to read two messages in the chat. One is from Jed: disappointing to see the stop sign enforcement camera legislation amended to a pilot program, only 45th district, with funds not all going to Baltimore City DOT. Would you like to comment on that briefly?
Robin, I can comment. I mean, that's not a DOT thing. It's not like DOT requested that. That's just our delegation narrowed that. So if people are disappointed that the program has been narrowed to not be maybe in their district where they live and have stop signs that are being run, they should contact their legislator.
Thank you. Thanks, Jed, for clarifying. The last comment that we'll have time for today is from Klaus: enforcement in person is key and more effective than automation. In the long run, your elaborate data collection should support state and federal legislation about vehicle design and geo fencing used to throttle speeds similar as it is already done for scooters.
Yeah, thank you. We definitely hope to use all the information that we collect over the Vision Zero action plan to support other efforts and legislation that can further support our Vision Zero goal.
Well, thank you so much, Shayna. I know we could probably speak for the entire hour on this program, but I will follow up with you directly following the meeting. We appreciate your time, and we also appreciate your excellent presentation. So thank you.
Thanks so much, all.
It is now my pleasure to introduce our second guest speaker, Delegate Mark Edelson. He is also the vice chair of the Transportation and Environment Subcommittee. We're so grateful to have Delegate with us this morning, given the very, very busy session that's going on in Annapolis as we speak. So good morning, Delegate Edelson.
Good morning, Robin. It's great to see you all. Thank you so much for being flexible with the timing. Early this morning, I thought we were going to have a voting session right now, and so I was going to have to unfortunately say that I couldn't be here, but thankfully that got moved a little bit. So I'm able to be here with you all, and it's great to see you all. This is one of the craziest times of session, without a doubt. Next Monday is what's known as crossover. And the significance of that is that any bill that has been introduced in the House or the Senate needs to have full passage out of that chamber and into the other chamber in order to have a shot at getting over the finish line and full passage prior to sine die in early April. So at this point in time, every committee in the House and the Senate has heard a few thousand bills. There has been an extensive amount of debate and analysis and amendment, and now we're sort of in that final stage of sort of frantic voting sessions and modifications and things like that, and whipping votes to see what bills are able to make it through to get to that final passage. So these last few days are always extremely intense, and I'm really glad that the timing worked out for me to be with you all this morning, sort of in between a million meetings and then being back on the floor for more voting sessions shortly. So, the update that I have for you is really that things are pretty frantic right now. I'll be totally honest. That's how it is every year this time. But this year with the challenges that we have in our state budget, and the implications of the actions being taken in Washington, D.C., are putting an incredible strain on our system. There's just no way around that. And so, everything that we are doing right now is really trying to balance those things and set Maryland up for the most possible success that we could have going forward. And obviously, for all of us in this meeting, that means how are we planning our transportation system, right? How are we spending our precious taxpayer dollars on the things that are going to get us the most bang for the buck? And so really, the two aspects of that, one is the policy side of it, and the actual pieces of legislation we passed that move the needle forward and help our friends at Baltimore City DOT to get the resources that they need to move the system in the city forward. And then on the other side of that, it's the financial question, right? It's the budget. It's where do we get the revenues from to fully fund the system that we want to build. And so, going back a couple steps, in September of last year, as you all know, the State Department of Transportation presented to all of us their draft CTP, the 6-year Consolidated Transportation Program. And it was candidly quite disappointing, right? There was $672 million in cuts at the hands of MTA alone. There was risk that there were going to be further cuts to highway user revenue, which is so important to Baltimore City, that there were going to be potential operational cuts. And, over the following few months through our collective advocacy, we were able to really turn that tide and have them introduce a final CTP as part of the governor's budget coming into the session that restored the overwhelming majority of those cuts and is putting us in a position to build out, the entire light rail modernization and overhaul program, and to have new escalators in our metro stations, and all the things that we know that are in the proposed final CTP that are so important. Then that goes through the budget process. And ultimately, the goal for us is to protect those investments and try to see if we can find some more to put more money into the system. And so that's sort of exactly where we're at right now. For a pretty decent part of session so far, there appeared to be very close to agreement between the House and the Senate on the governor's proposed budget and the revenue sources, et cetera, at least in terms of the amount of money that was proposed. If you recall, the new revenue that was proposed by the governor via the BRFA, the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, for transportation specifically, is about $420 million per year, which when you are able to use that to draw down, federal grant opportunities, it ends up being about $600 million per year. The two major sources of that revenue is the Amazon delivery fee of 75 cents per delivery for certain deliveries, and repealing the vehicle trade-in exemption, which is where when you take your car to a certified dealer and you want to trade it in for a new car, the taxes that you pay on that new car are essentially deducted by the trade-in value of the old car. So getting rid of that trade-in deduction and the Amazon fee was really the lion's share of that $420 million. Where we are right now is that candidly there is not agreement at this moment between the House and the Senate. One, on those two particular revenue sources, and two, on the amount of revenue that we're going to be looking to bring into our transportation system this year. I think the challenge is really trying to find the right balance between raising the revenues and investing in the system, while at the same time understanding that Marylanders are hurting right now, and folks are struggling to balance their own personal pocketbooks and and we want to be very thoughtful about that and trying to strike the right balance. I would say I think the House was there. I think our friends in the Senate are not quite there. I'm guessing you're going to have a question for me, which is how can we help? And the reality is, I think in the next few days, the advocacy of groups like this to help our friends in the Senate understand the critical nature of these investments in this system right now, not next year, not the year after that, but fully funding the proposed CTP that's on the table right now is absolutely critical to the city, to the region, but really to the entire state of Maryland. And so, that's sort of where we are in the next few days. The typical process is that the budget originates in one chamber each year and then the opposite chamber the next year. So this year it's been in the House. So we've sort of had first crack at it. Typically it would move through the House right around this weekend, crossover weekend. So we'll be in Annapolis all weekend, in voting sessions, debating on the floor. And this is usually the exact time when the House would move the budget and the BRFA, which is sort of the document that balances the financial policies in the budget at the same time this weekend. As of right now, those documents are still sort of being negotiated between the House and the Senate. And so, my suspicion is as of now, everything will sort of move along at the time that it does. But there's still heavy negotiation on those two. And the other thing that we cannot ignore is, as I said in the beginning, the implications of what's happening in DC. And so, every day that goes by, we get a little bit more data as to the decisions that the federal government is making and how it is that we need to protect Marylanders, quite frankly, from those decisions in areas like Medicaid, in areas like education, in areas like transportation. I'm sure everybody saw a week or two ago, the federal government put a pause on about $330 million worth of grant programs coming to the state of Maryland alone, specifically for transportation and climate initiatives. And so, these are the kinds of things that are frankly happening daily. If there's one thing about our federal government right now, it is not moving in any kind of a linear fashion. Things change every day, every hour, every minute. And so I think for us, it's about, trying to take in as much information as we can. But at the same time, at some point, we have to just make these decisions. And so, where I come down on them is we need to make the decisions that are going to set us up for success for our transportation system going forward. In my opinion, there are a few things that'll get us as much economic development potential as a high functioning transportation system paired with good land use policies. And so, that's sort of where I'm at on this. And I think many of my colleagues in the House are as well. But these are these sort of final few days where we're finalizing those discussions and those negotiations with the Senate, and it sort of changes frequently. But the impact that we as legislators make on one another is that we are all negotiating and trying to get the best possible data to make the decisions that we have. The impact that you all have is the ability to be incredibly persuasive in the advocacy that you have to convince those of us in these final few days and moments about the decisions that we make about the right way to move forward. So again, I would just implore all of you to think about how you can organize and sort of raise the energy levels, for our friends in the Senate in a respectful way, but in a way that helps them to understand just how many people are impacted by these decisions that we're making. And frankly, to help us in the House get a little bit more of the juice that we need to get everybody over the finish line in these final negotiations. So that's where we are. In terms of the pure policy piece, there have been a lot of bills moved in the House and the Senate. There are a lot that are also sort of tied up directly into the budget. One big one that I know you're all very focused on, that's my most important piece of legislation this year, that's HB 84, the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act. That bill was voted favorably out of the House Appropriations Committee, and it has since been voted favorably out of the House Environment and Transportation Committee. So my expectation is that that bill will be on the floor in the full House, either probably today or tomorrow. It will have second reader, and provided we're able to get it through second reader, it will then have third reader, and with a favorable vote, it will then be moving over to the Senate. So I am at this point, confident that we will get that bill out of the House favorably and into the Senate. I don't know the exact status of where the bill stands, in the Senate passage right now. I'd say my Senate cross-file, Senator Shelley Heddleman, is about as good as it gets. She is an excellent legislator, and I'm very fortunate to have her as the cross-file. So I have total confidence in her ability to do what needs to happen in the Senate. But that bill is moving. It's moving at the appropriate time, and so, I think that this is the right time for it to be happening, and there's plenty of time to get it moved from the House to the Senate and through the Senate in time before Sunny die. So that's the status update I can give you on that. A lot of the other transportation related bills that I have, the LOTS funding bill that would tie our LOTS locally operated transit system programs to the consumer price index, that if inflation rises, the contribution that we make goes to that rises, sort of tied up in the budget negotiations. The bill that I have, which is sort of TSIA 2.0, which is the Transit Safety and Investment Act that so many of you helped to pass in 2018. What this bill would do is sort of continue things on when that bill sunsets in 2028. What this bill would do is then continue that progress of mandating a certain level of investment in MTA state of good repair, and it ties that investment to our new capital needs inventory numbers. And so it bumps up that investment from $450 million or so per year to $550 million per year. That bill, frankly, is also sort of tied up in the budget negotiations. So it's sort of a whole package of things that will ideally all move together at the same time when we have this agreement that we're hoping to reach. So that's sort of the update that I can give you right now. Klaus, I see your question about the TOD bill. I think that bill is also, sort of tied up in these negotiations. There's the project prioritization bill that's a departmental bill of MDOT about changing how we do Chapter 30 and revising really the local aspects of the application for the CTP process. Both of those bills, frankly, are tied up in the budget negotiations right now as well. I think that on the TOD bill, there was a pretty significant amount of pushback from some of the counties and from MACO on behalf of the counties. And so I think that they're trying to work through some amendments to see if they can resolve some of those concerns. One of the concerns that I've heard has been raised is the notion of reducing or repealing parking minimums in the TOD bill near transit stations, which I have particular thoughts on because last year we passed my bill, which does repeal parking minimums within a quarter-mile radius of transit stations in Baltimore City. And it's interesting because at the time when I was proposing that bill, a lot of folks came to me and said, hey, why are you only doing this in Baltimore City? We need to be doing this in a broader sort of geographic region. And I said, I completely agree, but I'm also interested in making sure that this bill actually passes and not having it, sort of mired in local politics. And as we can see, as is happening with the TOD bill right now, unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. So we do at least have that, bill in place. But the TOD bill, I think, is candidly facing some challenges right now, but I'm hoping we'll be able to get it moving and get it over the finish line prior to midnight on Monday for crossover. With that, Robin, I'm happy to take any questions. I saw a number of ones in the chat, but I think some of them might be more City DOT focused. So I don't want to necessarily jump in on those, but happy to take any questions, comments, ideas that people have.
Thank you. I will facilitate that on your behalf. I'd like to start by sincerely thanking you and acknowledging you. We know how hard you're working. We know how dedicated you are to move the transportation agenda forward this session. And Transit Choices certainly fully supports your efforts. We have testified several times in support of the governor's proposed budget. I also want to mention that next Thursday, March 20th, the Move Maryland Coalition, of which Transit Choices is a proud member, is going to be conducting a lobby day to sort of, spend the entire day speaking with legislators. So we will continue to do whatever we can do to advocate, and support the governor's proposed budget. Because as we all know, we're very grateful for the proposed $420 million that the governor wants to commit, but we certainly need to go, far and above that. So I'd like to, Anna, are you still with us? I believe you had your hand up.
That was supposed to be, I was clapping for repealing the parking. It looked like a hand raised. I was not. Thanks.
Well, thank you for that. And Jed?
Thank you, Delegate, for all of your fighting for us. I really appreciate it. Could you give us a sense of like what the level of opposition to these revenue packages is that your office is hearing? I've sort of had other legislators imply the phones are ringing off the hook and no one cares about transit. And I don't believe that to be the case in talking with, some other elected officials who are more supportive of transit. And I'm just wondering, what you're hearing actually like in your office from your constituents.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, I don't have a tremendous amount of context because this is obviously only my third session, but I can tell you that this has been by far the most challenging. And it is the case that we are absolutely bombarded with an onslaught of emails and outreach and phone calls every day. That being said, they're sort of all over the map, right? Like I got a ton of emails, I think yesterday and the day before, from Baltimore folks saying, please support this legislation, one of which was mine, and fully fund our transportation system. So that's wonderful. I would say the two categories that we get the most outreach in right now is either, please don't cut X program or please don't raise X revenue. And that has been very intense this session. The challenge with those two things is that in many ways they're diametrically opposed. It is impossible, based on our constitutional requirement to pass a balanced budget, to both not cut any program and not raise any revenues. So that's really the challenge that we're facing right now. As certain things sort of come up and bubble up, that onslaught heightens. For example, with the business-to-business services tax proposal that was introduced a few days ago and had its hearing in Ways and Means yesterday, I'd say probably for the last 48 hours, the overwhelming majority of phone calls and emails and text messages that I have received have been about that. So, I think that kind of sort of extensive outreach is probably partially what is giving our friends in the Senate some heartburn and some unease right now. I'll say the 75-cent delivery fee proposal has been similar to that. I have received a tremendous amount of outreach on that. I personally, I'm just going to say in this meeting, would be okay voting for it because it excludes things like groceries and medical supplies. To me, it's one of those things where these vehicles, based on our society's use of things like Amazon, are absolutely destroying our roads. Many of them are low and zero emission vehicles, which is great, but it means they're not contributing to our gas taxes. And so they're really just destroying our roads without contributing to the maintenance and upkeep of our roads. And so to me, that's a basic fairness thing that we have to do. But I can tell you that we received a tremendous amount of outreach on that. But there's also been a ton of advocacy from groups like this saying, hey, this is why these priorities are so important. I saw that Baltimore Banner article this morning that showed for the first time in 9 years, Baltimore has not had population decline, right? That is a big deal. Granted, the amount of increase isn't huge, but to me, that's not what's important. What's important to me is this is the beginning of a trend that is showing population increase. And so that is the perfect time for us to be investing in things like bike and pedestrian access, and to be moving better land use policies, and to be investing in our transit system and the light rail and the metro, and expanding to build things like the Red Line, because that's where that economic growth and population growth will come from and be sustained by. And so, that's where I land on this. But I have these conversations with my colleagues all day, every day, and everybody has a sort of different worldview. And that's why the sort of positive advocacy for these kinds of things is so important. But the short answer to your question, Jed, is yes. It really has been an onslaught this session, but some of that has been a very positive onslaught. And a lot of it has been folks who deeply care about transit and want to see us enact these priorities and have very good, cogent arguments for why these things matter on so many different levels. And that helps.
Thank you, and thank you again for fighting for us.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, look, this is a team sport. So I appreciate the gratitude to me, but there's a whole host of colleagues of mine down here who are fighting just as hard as I am. And frankly, without you guys, this team would be severely hindered.
One last question, Delegate, and that is from the legislators that are opposed, for example, to the 75-cent delivery fee. Are they coming up with any alternatives?
That's an excellent question.
And is it too late?
No, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it is not too late. I would say every day I have conversations with my colleagues about alternative strategies and sources. At the end of the day, there are only so many things that can raise a few $100 million or $1 billion a year. I think that was sort of the part of the thinking behind the business-to-business services tax, which is that, we don't do a tremendous amount of manufacturing right now in Maryland. I think for most East Coast and West Coast states, the majority of your economy is professional services. And so, we've all kind of based our revenue systems on things like sales taxes and income taxes and property taxes, but we don't tax services. And the reality is that is, where our economies have been for probably 20, 30 years now, and will continue to go. And so if you're looking for significant sources of revenue, and ones that we haven't really, focused on, that is going to be one of them. The other option is to do something like raise the sales tax a penny, which is also extremely unpopular and regressive. I know Klaus often advocates, and I agree with him, on considering, raising the gas tax a little bit. Raising it to 50 cents would get us another couple $100 million a year, but I think that would have some political headwinds right now, but that's certainly something that is being considered and on the table. And so there are a lot of proposals that are in the mix. There are only so many that can get you to that number that we need to get to. I mean, when we came into session, the gap that we had to close is about 3 million. As a result of the steps taken by the federal government, we were informed by the Board of Revenue Estimates last week that gap has grown about another 280 to 300 million. The expectation is that gap will continue to grow. And so, at this point in time, we have about 2 billion in proposed cuts. We are currently sort of looking at finalizing about another 500 million in proposed cuts to try to close that gap. But a chunk of that gap ultimately is going to have to be closed by revenue, and revenue that's sustainable. You can't just do this stuff for 1 year because our structural deficit is growing. And so, yes, there are proposals to raise those revenues. I don't know that I've necessarily heard anything from our friends in our co-chamber that quite rise to the level of the amount of money that the 75-cent Amazon fee and the trade-in exemption repeal would raise. I mean, like I said, those are really the lion's share of the 420. I can't say I've heard anything in the transportation world right now that would rise to that amount, but there is absolutely time for us to get there.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Jimmy Rouse, the Transit Choices co-founder, to provide the closing remarks for today's meeting. Jimmy?
Well, I can't thank you enough, Mark, for the work you're doing. And I know how hard and stressful it must be. And it's great to have you on this presentation just so people realize how a democracy really works and how difficult it is to make changes and get to the goals that we're trying to get to. And I just can't thank you enough. And Shayna, your presentation was so thorough and wonderful. The work that goes into that thinking is just impressive to me. And I don't think people appreciate how the people in government work so hard to accomplish the things they do accomplish. And right now we're seeing on the federal level a tremendous tearing down of government, which is not my experience of government at all. I'm always impressed by the work people do and how dedicated they are. So I want to thank all of you who attend these meetings, because it's your attendance that actually helps us promote the agenda for better transit. And it's just so important to have you all here. And I'm glad these sessions prove so interesting to you. And we will keep providing you with interesting presentations if you keep showing up. So thank you. Thank you. I think that's really all we have time for, Robin.
That's correct. So with that said, we wish you all a wonderful day. We are planning another very interesting meeting for April, and details will soon follow. So Transit Choices will continue to keep you updated and informed as we push forward with our advocacy to really do whatever we can to get the governor's proposed budget approved for public transportation. Thank you all. Goodbye.